I'm Carrie DePhillips, and I'm here to introduce Pete Martino, who is a retired colonel in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve, who has been mobilized 3 times in his career. Pete has provided training, consulting, and program management services both nationally and internationally. He shared the American dream with thousands of Iraqi soldiers and has decided that it's time to rekindle it here at home. To that degree, he's also a YouTube sensation with over 500,000 views to his name. If you haven't seen that video, definitely check it out. It's inspiring, to say the least. And he is currently waging a personal war against corruption, abuse of power, and ignorance. So without further ado, here's Pete Martino.
Thank you. How's everyone doing tonight?
Great. How about you?
Pretty good. There won't be a quiz, but there will be homework. So some of you may want to take a few notes. Can I get a volunteer? How about you? Get back up here. All right, Carrie. Come on up. I won't bite. Okay. What I want to do here is these cards are going to represent problems and issues. We'll take out the jokers. And what I want you to do is pick one of these cards, but don't look at it. I mean, don't look at the card after you picked it. Okay. Now I'm going to trade you the problem that you're interested in for these 51. And what I'd like to do is, geez, everybody, I'll start with you. There are 4 suits in a deck of cards: hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs. Pick 2. Okay, that leaves clubs and spades. Out of the clubs and spades, pick 1.
Clubs.
Okay, out of the clubs, you have the numbered cards, and you have ace through 10, and you have the face cards, jack, queen, and the king. Pick one of those 2 sets. Numbered cards or face cards? Okay, that leaves the face cards. Out of the face cards, you have jack, queen, and the king. Pick 2.
Queen and jack.
The queen and the jack. Out of the queen and the jack, pick 1.
Queen.
Okay, what does that leave?
Jack.
Of what? Clubs. Now, how did I know that this was the card or the problem that Carrie wanted to talk about?
You had that in your hand.
Better yet, how do you know that that was the card or problem that she wanted to talk about? And that's one of the things I want to talk about tonight. Sorry, Carrie, but I came here to talk about my problems, not yours. So the consolation prize, you can have the cards as a consolation prize. That's what's known as the magician's choice. People use it on us all the time. My wife used to use it on my kids when they were young. Do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt to school? Chances are they wanted the black one with a hole in it, but that option got taken off the table. Salespeople use this on us all the time. Hey, look, I don't want to waste your time or my time, so after I tell you about my product, will you just give me a straight up yes or no? What's the third option that you probably would have chosen? Yeah, let me think about it. Politicians use it all the time. They seem to break every issue down into blue and red choices. Let me think about it. Never seems to survive the sales pitch. Now, if you had a car and you took it to a car wash because you were getting ready to go cross-country in it with your family, and the person washing your car said, hey, I noticed something under the hood, and I think you need to let me fix it. I could do it for $2,000 on my day off. Would you give him the $2,000? Let's say you went to your neighbor who's a used car salesman, and she's the one that sold you the car. And she said, it's fine, no problem. You can make it. Which one would you believe? The used car salesman or the person who washes your car?
I go for the third choice.
How about maybe you take it to a professional mechanic, or maybe even 2, and get a couple of different opinions? You see, one of the problems is that when it comes to political issues, most people will trust a professional politician and do nothing more than regurgitate talking points versus going out and talking to experts or doing a little bit of investigation to find out just what's going on with a particular issue. We tend to be very closed-minded in our politics. Once people latch on to a particular position, they take it as an affront to their own dignity if somebody questions it or attacks that position. And so, how many people have ever done anything stupid when you were young because everybody else was doing it? Okay. Now, I'd be willing to bet that somebody, most likely your mother, said, Well, if everybody was jumping off a cliff, would you? Well, if politics is any gauge, then the answer for a lot of people in this country is not only yes, but you'd probably be pushing people out of the way so as not to be last. And so one of the toughest things I ever did in my life was exit counsel somebody out of a cult. And after I did, I was so angry, I wanted to tear down the entire cult. But I knew that was going to be impossible, so I decided to just target one of the leaders. And I asked him if he'd be willing to just sit down with me and answer some questions. And he said yes, one-on-one. But before I started, I said, look, I'm probably the biggest sinner in the world. In fact, I'm probably the most rotten person on the planet. So if you'd like, tomorrow night, we can talk all about me. But for tonight, can we just focus on my questions and just stick with the issues? Now, if somebody's not willing to do that, they're either trying to manipulate you or you're in a cult. Well, he said yes. And 2 months later, I saw him on television helping John Stossel do an expose on that cult. Sometimes all you can do is plant ideas. An old proverb says that if you would plant for weeks, plant flowers. If you'd plant for years, plant trees. If you'd plant for eternity, plant ideas. One day, my wife and I were walking through the mall, and one of those kiosk vendors tried to corner us. And she said, "Can I ask you a little question?" And my wife said, "No, we're only taking big questions today." Ironically, the biggest question is also the littlest question. And we don't ask it enough in this country. And it's why. Let me catch up with the slides. There's your magician's choice. And we don't ask the question why enough. Like, why is it that the state of Louisiana got $4 billion as a result of one of their senators supporting Obamacare? Why is it that that company was chosen to build the healthcare website? Why is it that nobody's been held accountable in any of the myriad of political scandals in this country today? General Smedley Butler was the only Marine to be awarded the Medal of Honor, twice. After he retired, after World War I, he concluded that war was a racket, and he wrote a book by that title. He said, "A racket is best described, I believe, as something that's not what it seems to the majority of the people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge profits." He did some extensive research on World War I, and he found that the profiteering was incredible. The war created over 21,000 new billionaires and millionaires during a time when the frontline troops were making $30 a month. The national debt went from $1 billion before the war to $25 billion after the war. One company sold the U.S. taxpayers 20 million mosquito nets and an additional 40 million yards of mosquito netting. None of it was used or even needed. One enterprising company sold us 150 48-inch wrenches. They were put on boxcars and carted around the country trying to find a use for them. The only bolt in the country that would fit those wrenches was in the turbines at Niagara Falls. And so, also some of those companies were selling to the enemy. Fast forward to today, and what's changed? Now, companies not only profit by selling us things for the war, but bodies as well. There are combat troops and support troops in war. Nowadays, foreigners working for international companies with no loyalties to the United States are replacing a lot of those support troops. Things like cooks, drivers, mechanics, convoy security, and so on. And people might ask, well, what difference does it make? And I would say, why were 4 civilian contractors killed in Fallujah driving around unprepared for the risks that they faced? If their bodies weren't dragged through the streets, nobody would probably even have heard of Fallujah. And I'm sure a lot of Marines would probably still be alive today. And so I'd like somebody to answer the question, why? And I'm sure those families probably don't want to hear they're dead. What difference does it make? Now, my message to those families and of anyone else who lost anyone in Iraq is, I don't believe they did die in vain, even though a New York Times survey said that the majority of Americans believe that they did die in vain. Last month, the chief of police for Al-Anbar province said that Al-Qaeda, who wasn't even there when we first arrived, was now in control of Fallujah. But we planted some seeds in Iraq, and despite whatever justification was used to go there, I think a lot of the people over there are better off today than they were under Saddam Hussein. And so we planted ideas in a country or a part of the world that's not really known for being open-minded. Some people will tell you, well, they died to protect your freedom. But what exactly does that mean? Some people have their own perspectives on it. If you want to look at those troops and ask, what were they doing protecting your freedom? The only thing that they took an oath to was to support and defend the Constitution. So if you want to support the troops, go get a copy of the Constitution and read it, and get one for a friend. There are a lot of good ideas in there about freedom. There are a lot of good perspectives and definitions of freedom. I'd like to share two that I think are shared by a majority of the people in this country. Unfortunately, they're mutually exclusive. One of them is freedom from want and fear. And another is personal freedom, freedom to make your own life choices. And freedom from want and fear, well, one of those requires a controlling authority and the other a lack of one. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is, a government that could provide freedom from want and fear, could they handle the amount of authority that they would need to do it without abusing that authority? And could they do it without becoming corrupt? And on the other side of that coin, do we as a society and individuals have the maturity to be able to handle that type of personal freedom for our life choices without impacting or infringing on other people's rights and freedoms? Actually, what's the most important amendment? First Amendment. Shut the hell up. Isn't that what the IRS told the Tea Party groups? Isn't that what the chief of police in Concord told the Free State Project when he said he needed a Bearcat armored vehicle because of the threat that they posed? I love it when the government says, the American people think this, or the American people want that. Really? I feel like I didn't get the memo. Anyone else ever feel that way? So, one of the ways that governments and groups manipulate us is through cognitive dissonance. Everyone has an internal desire to have our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors in sync, in line. And if it's not, we experience cognitive dissonance. And people use it to manipulate us because it's very easy to control somebody's thoughts, even though it's the one thing that you have ultimate control over. And if I told you right now not to think about a piece of chocolate cake, especially not the chocolate frosting on top of it, some of you would probably be thinking about chocolate cake right now. If I put up a picture on that screen of children somewhere in the world being killed or tortured, it would probably stir certain emotions in you. Depending on what those emotions are, it could stir you to action, or at least stir you to get up off the couch and demand that somebody else take action. And so that's how people are manipulated. Some of the best emotions to manipulate people and change their behaviors are anger, fear, and guilt. And so people use this on us all the time. One of the times I was in the airport in Budapest and I saw a cigarette display. And there was a sign on there that said, "This product will kill you." And I thought, no dissonance there. Wouldn't it be nice if everybody or every organization came with warning labels like that. Because I believe that organizations can have cognitive dissonance as well, or dissonance. Excuse me. If you took the mission statement for your organization and you showed it to one of your coworkers and they laughed, then your organization has cognitive dissonance. If you took the Constitution and showed it to one of your neighbors or read it to one of your neighbors, would they laugh? If so, our government has cognitive dissonance. My cousin Joey decided he wanted to run for public office, so he hired a political consultant. And the consultant said, "What's your biggest weakness?" And he said, "Honesty." The consultant said, "I don't think that's a weakness." And he said, "I don't give a damn what you think." So much for a career in politics. But nowadays, we don't even call them lies. We call them false narratives. And there have been some great ones out there over the years. And when it comes to false narratives, a lot of it comes down to who is it that's telling the false narrative. If you had an employee or a friend who lied to your face, would you want them? If a politician lied to your face, would you defend them? I guess it all depends on who that politician was, what were the circumstances, what were the justifications, and most importantly, unfortunately for a lot of people, is simply whether or not that politician agreed with your politics. Noam Chomsky said that governments tend to classify things not necessarily to keep it from their enemies, who in a lot of cases already know, but from their own people. And recently, within the last few years, some top secret documents were declassified that confirmed that there was no unprovoked attack on a U.S. warship by the North Vietnamese. Now, I'm sure the North Vietnamese knew that, but that was the justification that was used to ramp up the war in Vietnam. Now, if we can't convince the American public of the need to send our sons and daughters into harm's way without having to lie or make up justifications, then shame on us. Trust is the fundamental glue that holds our society together, and I feel like we're losing it on every level. When the Concord chief of police said that he needed a Bearcat armored vehicle to deal with the threat or the challenges posed by the Free State Project, everybody should be concerned, because he either lied on a federal grant application or he really believes that the Free State Project is a pretty significant threat. And I don't know which is worse. Now, I'm all about officers having all the protection that we could give them to do their jobs. I understand that there are dangerous people out there that are well armed, but we tend to use the word safety to justify anything that will take away more of our freedoms. If the dozen or so police officers that I know in this state were to hold the keys to that vehicle, I'd have no problem if they parked it in my driveway. But unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. Our government doesn't quite inspire trust and confidence in us. There was a study done by the University of Illinois about the top cities in this country that were most notorious for corruption. And Philadelphia ranked among the top cities. Mr. Christian Marone, who was recently appointed as the chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security, was the key witness in the corruption trial of his father-in-law and former boss, State Senator Vince Fumo. While working for Mr. Fumo, he spent 80% of his time overseeing renovations on the senator's home. When asked in the court, he said that he was just a victim of the culture of Philadelphia politics. And so when we look at Mr. Fumo and some of the things that he was involved in, his father was given a patronage job for the Philadelphia Turnpike Commission for 10 years. One of the Philadelphia City Council members said that when pressure from the feds started coming down to save his butt, he went the other way. He knew enough about everything to save himself. He kept the emails and documents and had the proof he needed to make a deal. Otherwise, he'd be serving jail time. Secretary Johnson of the Department of Homeland Security was impressed with Mr. Marone's integrity and management abilities. Now, was he the best person to pick for that job out of everybody in the country that could have been chosen for such a critical position in an agency that should be trying to instill trust and confidence in its abilities? He was chosen. Right here in New Hampshire, one of our senators, Jean Shaheen, when she was the governor, she chose Peter Hildreth to be the banking commissioner. He was later linked to Scott Farah, president of FRM, a mortgage brokerage firm that defrauded hundreds of victims out of millions of dollars. Hildreth was allowed to retire with full benefits after publicly stating that he had dirt on then-Governor John Lynch. Richard Head, the director of consumer protection for the Attorney General's office, who ignored numerous criminal complaints over the years, was tapped to do the investigation, which whitewashed the whole thing. Governor Lynch later nominated him to be the Deputy Attorney General. The cover-up in this whole scandal cost the victims more money than the criminals themselves who were doing jail time. When it came out what had happened, our other senator, Kelly Ayotte, who was the Attorney General at the time, said, "I'm a firm believer that the buck stops at my desk," but the buck never made it to my desk. It always seems to manage to land in somebody's pocket, though. In fact, our New Hampshire Attorney of the Year, Steve Nottinger, and his law partner, Jim Donchis, former mayor of Nashua, found over $2 million into their pockets, all legally. And you can find out more about that scandal by going to that website and also reading the book Cover Up by Mark Conley. Another thing that bothers me about the people we choose is our ambassador to Belgium, Howard Gutman. I don't know if anybody's heard about him, but I don't know if this is true, but an internal memo at the IG's office in the State Department determined that he routinely ditched his protective security detail in order to solicit sexual favors from both prostitutes and minor children. The ambassador's protective detail and the embassy's surveillance detection team, staffed by host country nationals, were well aware of the behavior. A spokesman for Secretary Clinton said, "We learned of it from the media, and we don't know anything beyond what's been reported." Why? Why don't you know? Why don't you go find out? Don't you think it's important that the one person who's representing our entire country to the people of Belgium might be molesting their kids? When Jeff Toobin wrote in commentary that Gutman was a Washington super lawyer who bought his title of ambassador with massive contributions to President Obama's campaign. This stuff gets me a little upset, and I know a lot of other people are too. People in this country have talked about starting a revolution or things like that. And to those people, I would say, take your finger off the trigger, put your weapon on safe, and instead join me in declaring your own personal war on corruption, abuse of power, and ignorance. Not illiteracy, but ignorance about what really goes on in this country, in our government, and in some of the institutions, in some of the darker corners of it. I declared my war on corruption in front of a congressional committee up in Concord. You can see it on my YouTube channel the one-man march. I'd like to challenge you, and I challenged all those members of the committee to do the same thing. And I'd like to challenge all of you that on March 4th, contact every one of your elected officials and in your own way, declare your own war on corruption. Another thing I'd like you to do on March 4th, and I've got several other homework assignments for you, is to contact all of your elected representatives and ask them to either support or sponsor a bill that would require all public officials to take the oath to tell the truth in addition to the oath of office. All it would do is require them that whenever they're speaking in an official capacity, whether it's to the media, to the public, or whoever, that they simply tell the truth under penalty of perjury. Now, I think if politicians told the truth more and we held them accountable, it would do a lot to bring back faith and confidence and trust in our government. And I think if they had a little more credibility, that people would feel a little bit more comfortable that the NSA is turning the entire planet into the Truman Show and we're all Truman. A while back, there was a glitch in the EBT card system. Some folks that were on public assistance in Louisiana found that their EBT cards had unlimited credit line. And so they went on a shopping spree and within hours emptied the shelves in a couple of Walmarts down in Louisiana. Now, if you look at the way our country spends money, one of the things that Admiral Mullen said, who was a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was that I've said many times, I believe the single biggest threat to our national security is our debt. That little figure in the middle of that pile there is the Statue of Liberty. Now, in the last budget go-around, President Obama said that the government has to pay its bills. Just like the American taxpayer, we can't be deadbeats. Well, if we're going to compare the government to the American taxpayer, let's go all the way. If the American taxpayer managed their finances the way the government does, then the average American median income is about $50,000. They would be spending $75,000 a year, which would give them a $25,000 deficit. If they did that for 2 years, that would be a $50,000 debt. If they continue to rack up deficits every year like the federal government, right now where they'd be is in debt up to $425,000. And so at some point, the American taxpayer would not be able to borrow any more money to pay off that debt, and so they would either lose their house or have to file bankruptcy. Now, one of the things that I'd like you to consider is the fact that right now, the federal deficit or the federal debt is $17 trillion. Steve Hawking couldn't even fathom numbers like that. I'd like to challenge everyone, especially members of Congress, to count to 1 million. On your spare time, if you're in the car driving or waiting in line, it's actually very meditative. Just pick up where you left off. I'd be very impressed if you could make it to 10,000. If you did it nonstop without sleeping, it would take you 12 days. If you were to count to 17 trillion, it would take you over 540,000 years. Now, the American taxpayer, on average, will pay about $350,000 in their lifetime in taxes. If you lived in a city of 50,000 people and you took the taxes that all of those people will pay in their lifetimes and added it up, it wouldn't pay the interest on the national debt for 1 month. If you'd like to do something about this, contact this person at this email. They're in the process of putting together a project that will help educate the American public of just how vulnerable we've become because of our politicians and the way they manage their money. If you've got those skills in particular, send them an email. Now, where does the country get all this money? The government borrows it. When you borrow money and you go to the bank, They want to know what your income is because that's how you're going to pay it off. When the United States goes to foreign countries like China, Russia, Japan, and others, they look at the country's income. And that comes from you, the taxpayer. That's the credit that the United States has backing its money. Nothing else is your labor. Now, the government has its own EBT card. And it seems like every several years they raise their self-imposed credit limit. Just like those folks in Louisiana whose EBT cards allowed them to go on that spending spree. It was a drop in the bucket to what the government spends with their EBT card. But what's going to happen when that EBT card runs dry? There were also some other folks that had their EBT cards the opposite of what happened in Louisiana. Their cards had 0 credit on it. And so things got pretty ugly across the country in some Walmarts. And so what do you think is going to happen when the country's EBT card runs dry, when we simply can't get countries like China or Russia to loan us any more money? The American people are already in debt themselves with credit cards, student loans, large mortgages, and so on. How can you truly be free and follow the pursuit of happiness if you're in debt like that? Now, with the addition of the debt from the federal government, every man, woman, and child can add another $50,000 onto their personal debt. And that really makes us slaves, because as a country, how can we consider ourselves the land of the free anymore when a foreign country could collapse our currency and our economy simply by not loaning us money? The more likely scenario is they'll allow us to continue paying them and our children and our grandchildren. And what are the consequences of that? I'd like to sum up what I think is the cycle, or an admitted, very, very simplified version of our political process, and admittedly cynical. A corporation donates money to a campaign. A politician takes that money and spends a lot of it on signs and bumper stickers that say nothing more than "Vote for John Schmuckatelli." And lots of people will jump off that cliff and think that, well, everybody else is voting for him, so why not? And then when he gets into office, those companies will get all sorts of lucrative contracts from the government, and some of those individuals will get lucrative jobs or maybe even ambassadorships. And the lemmings that voted for him, they'll get their little mini bribes in the forms of some other type of government handouts or contributions or programs. And so my other theory is, and if he doesn't get reelected the next time, he'll take a lucrative job with one of those companies. The other possibility could be that this is all just a plot perpetrated by the people who make the signs and bumper stickers. So I leave it to you to think about it. If you come up with a better theory, please let me know. But that's the cycle. Now, what can we do about it? Well, I've got my own strategy. As I said, we don't need a revolution in this country. We've already fought one. What we need is a war on corruption, abuse of power, and ignorance. And these are some of the tactics that you can use to fight that nonviolent war. One of them is to take the advice of Homeland Security. If you see something, say something. It's all the people who work in the government. There was somebody in the IRS who sat in a cubicle next to somebody who was breaking the law and didn't say anything. To you, I would say, go gather up some of your coworkers and go say something to somebody. And if nothing happens, then take it up the level of your chain of command until somebody does something. Another thing I'd like to challenge, because our government is really we the people, so it's us. So if you work for the government in any capacity at all, treat the taxpayer dollar like it's your own, because it is. And so if you have people working for you that you wouldn't even pay with your own money if you were in business, then fire them. What I'd like you to do is on March 4th, all those people that work for you that are either incompetent or dishonest, counsel them, bring them in, give them training, give them guidance, teach them how to do their jobs with competence and with integrity. And if they don't measure up, if they don't turn around, then start the long, painful process of trying to fire a government employee. Another thing, for those of you who are ready to start a revolution and are willing to die and pull the trigger, instead of dying for this country, trying to overthrow it, if you're willing to die, be willing to dedicate a year of your life and go work for the government. Every skill that you could possibly have, I guarantee there's a government job out there that needs that skill. Go find it. If you're an accountant, go take a job with the IRS and straighten the place out. The key is what I call the one-man march. And it's not about one person. It's about everybody. It's about mankind. It's about figuring out what is it that you were born to do. What are you passionate about? Everyone has unique talents and skills and abilities. And so Dr. Martin Seligman, who founded the field of positive psychology and wrote a book called Authentic Happiness, he found that there were three major ingredients to happiness. Positive emotions or feelings that come about as a result of exercising your strengths and virtues. People don't even know what they are. People are in dead-end jobs. They don't even know what their virtues are, what their strengths are. Experiencing flow, which is that state of mind that you're in when your particular skills and abilities perfectly match the challenges at hand. And finally, activities that provide us with a sense of meaning and purpose. So the pursuit of happiness is unique for everybody. And I believe in the one-man march that even though it sounds counterintuitive, the best way to unite this country is if everybody marched off in their own unique direction, following their passion, doing what they were born to do, what gives them purpose in life. Other things that we can do. If you're coming out of high school and you don't know any of those things yet, before you go spending all kinds of money and borrowing all kinds of money to go to college, spend some time out of the classroom and figure out what's out there. What are you best suited to do? If you're in a negative environment and you're in a dysfunctional situation, then get out of it. One of the things that I think is the greatest thing that young people can do today, they're in those types of situations, look into the worldwide opportunities on organic farms or woofers. All you have to do is show up. These people have farms, small farms all over the world. You go there, probably work about 20 hours a week on average, and they'll provide room and board. That gives you plenty of time to get reestablished in that new city and start a whole new life for yourself and a fresh start. Another thing that I think we can do to try and take back this country is follow Stuart Wilde's advice. He tells a story about a young kid on his front lawn one day was thumping his chest and screaming at the top of his lungs, "I am the chief of the Hully Gully tribe." And then his father came by and said, "Shut up and get in the car." And that's what happens to all of us. We start out with that spirit, and then life, the government, people around us say, "Shut up and get in the car." And so your tribe, what I think is we should start your own tribe. Be the chief. Call it whatever you want. Invite people into it. Build your own network of friends, family, and so on. And even though you're the chief of the tribe, you don't have any authority or control over those people because they're the chief of their own tribes. But when you form these networks, you have access to all those resources, all those people who are in their tribe's resources, their skills, their abilities, all those things. And so when it comes to how do we pull our country together, start at the grassroots level. Build your own tribe. Figure out the things that you can do in your life to enhance your community. Learn who the police are. Go introduce yourself to community leaders. Say, "I'm from the public and I'm here to help." And then figure out how you can. Take care of your tribe. You can't control them, but you can lead them. You can inspire them. You can support them. Instead of giving money to charity, give it to somebody in your tribe who needs it. Take charge of your own lives. Follow your dreams. Follow your passions. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to control your thoughts for the last 45 minutes. And I hope I stirred some of your emotions to go out there and follow your passion, to fight a war on corruption in your own way. I've got a game that I'm putting together, and it's about political scandals. If you've got political scandals in your communities, I like the local ones because there you can do something about it. Once they get to Washington, it's too late. So send them to me. You'll be able to put them on my, post them on my Facebook account, the One Man March, and you'll be able to download the game for free. And I would also challenge you to march forth and conquer. Send your best to Washington. Get rid of the corrupt. For those of you who are one-issue voters, stop letting politicians divide us and pit us against ourselves with issues like abortion, gun control, immigration, you name it. Those are just distractions to keep you from following your pursuit of happiness, but also to keep you from looking at what might be going on over here. And so pay attention. See what's going on in the world. Follow your dreams, follow your passions, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.